I've done everything on this channel from declaring used Xeons and X79 platforms dead to declaring they deserve a second chance at life. I'm gonna milk this one again. Welcome back to Craft Computing, everyone. As always, I'm Jeff, and today we are building another X79 rig, but this one is a little bit different. You see, I've always focused on X79 as a new budget platform, something that you could purchase and put together for fairly inexpensive. But they're not necessarily holding up to the top-end CPUs anymore, so is there any value left in the X79? I would say absolutely yes, especially if you need to upgrade an old system. See, as much as PC gamers think that everyone has brand new systems, or at least something within the last 5 or 6 years, this is my brother-in-law's old PC, and it's been passed down to at least 2 other family members. Inside of it is a 13 or 14-year-old at this point, AMD FX-8350 8-core CPU with 16 gigabytes of DDR3 memory, a GTX 660 graphics card, and a usable power supply. Obviously, it's not holding up to modern gaming demands, so you don't really want to throw a lot of money at upgrading a dead platform. But why not use some of the parts out of this and give them some new life? Remember when manufacturers refused to make their cases wider, and so to fit all the cables in the back, they just gave them a little bulge right there?
You look like you've been run over.
I do.
You're freaking Looney Tunes now.
Oh my god. I didn't even think about that when I said it on my knee.
God. Your brother-in-law.
Left tire tracks on me, holy crap. So obviously there's nothing that could be done to upgrade that AMD 8-core, 8-threaded Sorry, one sec. Hello? Oh, right. Yeah, I forgot about that. Okay. Okay, yeah. No, I got my check for $50. It's cool. Alright, thanks. Bye. Yeah, so scratch that. 4-core, 8-threaded CPU, because AMD was involved in a class action lawsuit that resulted in all of you getting checks if you had one of these particular CPUs. Apparently, you can't call something an 8-core CPU when it shares floating point units. AMD knows that now. But there are still a ton of usable parts in that system. Obviously, we have the 4GB sticks of G.Skill Ripsaw's 1600 DDR3 memory that will work on the X79 platform. Now, obviously, the mounting hardware for that Cooler Master 140mm AIO cooler are long gone, but you can pick up something like this Snowman 6 heat pipe cooler for as little as about $16 over on AliExpress. Now, obviously, to resurrect an old PC like this, we don't want to spend a lot of money. So for the X79 motherboard, I picked up this Machinist X79 for just $55 on AliExpress, shipped straight to my door. And for the CPU, we also went as cheap as possible while keeping those clock speeds as high as possible. This is the Xeon E5 2643 V2, an Ivy Bridge chip with 6 cores and 12 threads, with a base clock of 3.5 GHz and an all-core turbo of 3.7. So it's a CPU that's not going to blow you away, especially by modern standards, but it will be a significant upgrade to that 8350 FX processor, and this was just $16. Now, as good as the GTX 660 was in its day, it is definitely starting to show its age, especially with only 2 gigabytes of video memory. So we're gonna go ahead and step up to an RX 570 4GB card. You can pick these up on the used market thanks to the crypto crash for as little as $65. That means, all told on this entire upgrade, we're gonna be looking at just $155, as long as we can reuse the power supply, the memory, and the storage that came in this system. Luckily, my brother-in-law had already upgraded to SSD storage, but if you're not so lucky, the good news is that SSD storage has plummeted in price in the last couple of months, with 1TB drives available at as little as $45. In fact, you can get 500 gig drives for $30 and under. So if you haven't upgraded yet, now is definitely the time to do that. Ordinarily, on a system upgrade like this, I would just reuse whatever case came with the system. But the new owner does want to save a little bit of room, so we are going with a micro ATX motherboard, and I'm going to swap out that Cooler Master CM692 for an InWin 301. This is totally an optional step and does not need to impact your budget if you're looking at similar upgrades. So, with all the introductions out of the way, let's go ahead and get this thing together and see how much more performance we can squeeze out of an old system. Well, I was planning on giving some before and after results so we could see how much slower the FX-8350 was, but it won't even post right now. I knew this thing was on its last legs. It was starting to have some issues, but apparently the trip over to my house is all it took to not want to boot up anymore. It had crashed a couple of times earlier. What I can tell you is I know the cooler is working, the pump is working, I'm getting cold water through the coils there. I tried this with a different video card, I tried it with different memory. Something just is not happy. So, unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to give you any before results for the 8350, but hopefully we can still see how good of a system the X79 replacement is. So, let's just go ahead and strip this thing parts and get the new system built. Alright, so the PC is all together, and I've got to say, for a random assortment of used parts, this is a fantastic looking build. Not a single component matches another, from the neon green motherboard to the crimson G-Skill memory, the blue LEDs on the Snowman cooler, even the bright neon orange SATA cables, but it all just kind of seems to work together somehow. The final tally for this upgrade was just $155, since we were able to reuse the DDR3 memory, the EVGA 600-watt bronze power supply, and the SSD and the hard drive from the AMD FX system. Now, like I mentioned, I was hoping to get some before and after performance data, but the old FX processor just wasn't having any of that. So we're gonna have to see how the new X79 can perform in some games. While I don't have any solid benchmark data from the FX-8350, I have previously tested an AMD FX-4100. While the two CPUs aren't even from the same product line, with the 8350 being based on 2012's Pile driver, and the 4100 coming out in 2011 based on the Bulldozer architecture, they were quite similar in terms of single-threaded performance. A quick look at Cinebench R15 shows the FX4100 hitting a single-threaded score of just 80 points, and sits as one of the lowest performing CPUs that I've ever personally ran through that benchmark. Meanwhile, the Xeon E5 2643 V2 comes in right at the top of that bell curve for Ivy Bridge-based chips, scoring a 131, or nearly a 65% improvement running at the same 3.6 GHz frequency as the FX4100. Again, it's not an exact comparison, as the 8350 does run at a slightly higher 4 GHz, but it does give you some idea what kind of performance lift you can expect out of this $70 motherboard and CPU package. Moving on to gaming, I focused mainly on more demanding titles in my test suite, showing a sort of worst-case scenario when it comes to playability. Starting with Project Cars 3 at 1080p and high settings, the RX 570 and Xeon combo managed to hit 83 FPS on average with a very respectable low of 44. And if you look carefully, you can see midway through turn 3 where Choco the cat failed while jumping into my lap and dug his claws into my thigh. When I did eventually finish the race in 12th place, I gave him a stern talking to, followed by 5 minutes of scritches. Red Dead Redemption 2 surprised me a bit with an excellent experience and an average of 63 FPS, and very impressive lows of just 38. This was at 1080p with the variable slider set to the first balanced preset. This resulted in most of the settings being turned to medium or high, and with textures being set to ultra. There was really nothing to complain about during gameplay, as frames were smooth and consistent, especially considering the total cost of this PC upgrade. Tiny Tina's Wonderlands is the one title that did struggle to maintain smooth frame rates. While it managed to average 63 frames per second, it did experience significant stutters and a 0.1% low of just 5 FPS. While I've had some issues with Borderlands games dropping frames when moving from hipfire to scope view, this was seemingly an issue with shaders not being fully cached. Events like exploding barrels or creature death animations would stutter badly on their first instance, but then run perfectly fine from there on after. This may have been a limitation of only having 4GB of video memory, even with settings set to 1080p and medium detail. Cyberpunk 2077 continues to be the Dark Souls of PC gaming benchmarks when it comes to older hardware, as it's the one game today that was not able to hit an average of 60 FPS or higher. Even at 1080p and low presets, we averaged just 46 FPS, with 0.1% lows at 21. The stutters were definitely noticeable here, which made aiming consistently difficult when in combat. If Cyberpunk is on your list of games to dive into, maybe consider jumping up one more tier in graphics cards, either to a GTX 1070 or 1080 class card, just to get that extra boost in performance that this game needs. Last but not least, Doom Eternal did not disappoint with an average of 75 FPS when running at 1080p and high presets. Low frame rates were also kept in check, bottoming out at just 42 FPS. While ultra settings may have been possible when it comes to GPU core performance, trying to enable them resulted in a warning that the GPU was out of video memory, and to please adjust my game settings down a tick or two. While 4GB is still enough to play nearly any game today, there are definitely some upper limits to be aware of, even without jumping up to 1440p or 4K resolutions. So, there you have it, a solid upgrade to a PC that is more than a decade old for just $155. While I tend to always keep budget in mind when reviewing hardware, even I can wind up a bit short-sighted when it comes to PCs that are still used in people's houses. This old AMD FX-8350 was still up and playing games just 2 weeks ago, dutifully playing games like Minecraft, Overwatch, and Rocket League without a care in the world. With a fairly inexpensive upgrade, my extended family can probably expect at least a couple more years out of this before they need to consider upgrading again. That's not a bad return for hardware even I was starting to consider ready for the scrap heap. Links for where to find all the parts in today's video are down in the video description. If you're interested in putting together a similar system for yourself, please give those a look, as any click on an affiliate link really does help out the channel more than you know. On your way down there, make sure to drop this video a like and subscribe to Craft Computing if you haven't done so already. Follow me on Mastodon for daily shenanigans like this. And if you like the content you see on this channel and want to help support me in what I do, consider joining the Patreon. Link is down in the video description. And that's going to do it for me in this one. Thank you all so much for watching, and as always, I will see you in the next video. Cheers, guys. And this is definitely Rogue's best Dead Guy yet. Could drink that all day. Beer for today, I've been waiting to get my hands on for about a month now. It is the Rogue Dead Guy IPA. That's right, Dead Guy Ale, now in IPA form. This one's clocking in at 7% and 64 IBUs. Now I'm going to use the tallest 12-ounce mug that I own.
Uh-oh.
Oh yeah. You got to do it like they do in the commercials, right? If this was a beer commercial, they would have hired me just now for that perfect little... It's just the right translucency and opaqueness that I want in an IPA. That head is just gorgeous. Ugh. Ooh, that's crisp. Super bright citrus right up front. And not the right term, but champagne-like on the back end. Just effervescent, crisp, dry finish. I like this one. Oh, yeah. I think I like this better than Dead Guy.